Wow, my dude, what's up?
Hello.
Are you excited?
Not particularly, but...
Oh. How you doing? How's life?
Could be better, but...
Alright, so here we are. In the flesh, chatting to one another. I love pulling randoms on from Twitter. This is the highlight of my week.
Definitely an effective strategy.
I agree. Okay. Well, where do you want to begin, my dude? I'll give you the option of directing the conversation.
I honestly think we should just go back to generally where this started, because track of it.
Okay, sure. Well, it started with you tweeting at me that I'm a short, limp-wristed, incest-defending beta male manlet that thinks socialism is a viable option. We can work our way back from there. Where do you get the idea that I support socialism? I'm curious.
I just was pulling that out of my butt.
Okay. Beta male manlet,
honestly...
I'll give you that one, I guess. And then we've got limp-wristed, I give you that one, I guess. Incest-defending. We can focus on that one, since it seems to be such a fun topic. Yeah, where do you get the idea that I defend incest?
Pardon me, I have a cold, but, I'll try not to... Let's see. It originally starts with the clips of, you going, well, why is incest morally reprehensible? And I think that on its a direct, affirmation, approval of incest, like it's completely morally correct. I agree that it's simply, bringing up the topic of discussion, but...
So anytime somebody questions something that somebody takes for granted, or anytime somebody's got wants to bring a discussion up, like, well, why is this wrong? You think that means that they are explicitly endorsing it? Isn't that a little extreme?
Okay, let me collect my thoughts here. It's not necessarily if you question something, that on itself is not a, direct affirmation that incest is morally, it's more or less just the opening of discussion, and I agree, but it's...
Wasn't that all I did when I asked that question? Isn't that just a way to open up discussion?
Yes, in that particular instance. However, I just was recently looking over your past incest debates with completely random people, such as myself, and I disagree on several of your points. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a cold and I'm quite tired. But
well, I'm curious. I guess you're going to talk about it. I'm curious to hear it. Why do you think incest is wrong?
I think incest is wrong for numerous reasons, and I think that you have to look at it, in two different forms. I think you have to look at it. You have to make different arguments for heterosexual incest and then homosexual incest, because I think that there are, slightly different arguments to be made against the two.
Well, that kind of makes it sound like you don't have any arguments against incest, then, if you have to make different arguments for different types of it, right? If you can argue that incest is wrong, shouldn't you be able to argue that all incest is wrong?
There's slight differentiations between, heterosexual incest and homosexual incest. Overall, I think that I can argue fairly well that it overall is a bad concept, but you also have to go into further detail between the two. And you definitely have to make that, differentiation between the two, because they aren't the same thing, in my opinion.
All right, well, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with heterosexual incest.
Okay.
So, the concept that incest is bad is generally, a social construct that stems from the fact that humans naturally don't want to with, close family members due to the fact that there's possible repercussions in terms of genetics in the offspring.
Okay, but couldn't you just have protected sex?
Yes, that's. I'm just stating what it generally stems from.
Yeah, I understand your statement, but I'm countering your statement with an argument to challenge the validity of that statement. You say that one reason why people think that incest is wrong is because of creating genetically fucked offspring. So I propose the option to engage in incest without ever having offspring, right, as a challenge to that argument. So it seems like you can have heterosexual incestual relationships without ever having offspring.
Yeah, as a counter to that argument, that's a perfectly, valid statement. And that's why I think that there's somewhat of a between heterosexual incest and homosexual incest, at least in terms of that argument. So I completely agree with you there. If it's purely just to if it's purely just for the sake of, not creating a, however you want to describe it, combination of an offspring, that is a alternative to that. So that argument is perfectly valid to defeat that point. So this is more of, should it be done rather than, done with no repercussions, because I think, it could be, especially now in, the modern world, it could be done without any repercussions, but...
Well, then let's move on to the arguments that aren't easily countered, then.
Okay, I wasn't... Moving on. But basically, I think that incest at its core is morally wrong because of the different relationships that you develop with your, close relatives as you're growing up. I think it's much different than that of someone who's in a relationship. It's I'm sorry. I think generally that entirely if it's distant relatives as opposed to close relatives.
Wait, but who are you to make a moral judgment on the interpersonal relationship that somebody else has with a family member?
Just saying that at its I need to rephrase some stuff because I'm not the best at articulating my points.
Okay.
As you can tell, but I think that these interpersonal relationships, just growing up, are generally, different than those of which you would, your relationship with that person, who you're a couple with, would be much different than one with your siblings, at least growing up, because children aren't, little children aren't thinking about that.
Whoa, no one's talking about little children. I never advocated for pedophilia.
Saying that, but I'm just saying when you're growing up as a child, the relationships that you're going to be developing aren't going to be based off of, romantic relationships. They're going to be based off of friendships and, I'm having trouble describing my words, but yeah, you see what I mean, hopefully. If not, just tell me, because I can be quite...
Well, it sounds like you're saying that children grow up and they form certain types of relationships, that are unique in the family structure. I don't disagree with this, but I guess I'm asking, what is your moral argument against incest?
My moral...
Seems like a non sequitur.
So morally, all of this is originally I thought that there wasn't too much of a gray area. Now that I'm looking into it, there definitely is. It's when you. I think. Okay, let me just.
When you say that, that's really interesting because I feel like earlier you tweeted that there was no gray area.
I did.
I literally asked you a single question. I just asked you why it was wrong, and your entire argument has like fallen apart. Why are you such a mean person online? I'm curious.
Okay, so honestly, I think that with you, at least in particular, because you do let it get to you.
I'd let what get to me?
Insults.
No, I don't. I usually just block them and move on, my dude. That's why I didn't like respond to you hardly at all.
I know, but it's in my opinion, the fact that you did respond proved my point.
Well, I responded because sometimes I farm content by taking people that act very confident online and then bringing them into a verbal setting where every single thing that they said online starts to look like a satire of itself because you've completely fallen apart when I pose you like a single simple question. So, I mean, you kind of, we're falling a little bit far behind on the make me look like a, hold on, which one was it? A hobbit? A little hobbit boy getting ass blasted by whichever guest I bring on. Are you one of those guests that's ass blasting me right now?
Most definitely not. I agree that I'm falling apart, and that's just I'm a loser.
Well, I guess it irritates me because like you acted very, 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 very mean online, and you made some very strong statements. But now that I bring you on here, you sound like one of the most incest-supporting people that I've ever talked to. You don't have a single argument against incest.
Due to the fact that I can't really articulate my points too well. Typically, when it's online, it's difficult to argue over Twitter. Definitely because you miss all the connotation of actually, talking to someone. But it also gives me the time to think out, what I'm going to.
So you tweeted this like almost over 24 hours ago. This is controversial ethics to a fucking redneck, but to the rest of the intelligent population, it is universally a bad thing. Like it sounds like you have a very strong opinion on this, but you can't articulate a single intelligent thought as a defense.
Yeah, that. I am really bad at that, but it's
bad at thinking.
Not necessarily how I would put it, but it's when you're actually, that's why I'm saying that this is a very good strategy that you use.
It's not a strategy. I just brought you on here to have a conversation. I haven't insulted you. I haven't
completely destroyed me.
I just asked you a question, though. You destroyed yourself.
No, that's the point. It's when you. That's the point of it, or at least how I see it is, people do act much differently online than they would, when actually talking to the person. It's.
I'm a little bit curious. Okay, let's do a little exercise in empathy. How do you think it feels from my perspective when I get 1 million people like you that are tweeting under Ian's little wing to try to throw out totally random insults at me, saying that I'm a socialist or that I'm an incest supporter, and then when I talk to them, most of them end up sounding like you. Not that you sound particularly bad. I mean, you are about on the same level as most other of these types of drones that I bring on. Don't you think that's a little annoying? What
does Ian have to do with any of it?
Oh, I didn't. I assume that you came from his crowd. Who did you see tweeting?
Oh, I honestly don't even remember, but yeah, no, I think it just was. I saw you. Generally, with insults, I'm completely fine with people insulting me because I'd be a massive hypocrite if I wasn't okay with that. I mean, and there are tons of things to insult me on.
I don't care about insulting you. It's the I don't even care about being insulted. That shit is fun for me. I've been on the internet my whole life, okay? Insults are fun for me. The annoying part is when I get misrepresented. So, how can you call me a socialist? Like, you said that you were joking, but you referenced socialism in multiple tweets. You asked if socialism is where I draw the line, and then you said that I'm phenomenally retarded or a horrible person based on a belief that you just admitted you have no idea if I actually even support.
I was,
Do you think that Sweden actually has bomb attacks on a daily basis?
Not on a daily basis, but they definitely do have terrorist-related attacks at a much higher level than, other countries. And I think that
what
that's
is that
related.
level? Do you know how many terrorist attacks Sweden has had this year?
There's also a gray area to that, because the government, the Swedish government, doesn't necessarily classify all of these attacks as terrorist attacks.
Can you give an example of a terrorist attack that happened in Sweden that they didn't classify as a terrorist attack? Whew. It's getting pretty sweaty, man, in here.
Hold on, I need to go turn the fan on.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm just...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, there are definitely problems in Sweden right now. I would even go as far as to say there are probably problems with Muslims in Sweden right now, but it seems like the hyperbole doesn't really help the conversation.
Well, in terms of socialism, I wasn't intending necessarily to misrepresent you. Mostly I just was... I asked, but...
Well, who even advocates for socialism?
You look at the replies to that comment, because it's definitely, I definitely was quite pleased with the reaction I got after that.
Well, so that's how you determine, who's actually advocating for a position, is you make a tweet and then you see who responds to you?
I'm not necessarily saying that you advocate for socialism.
Well, you're saying that random people that tweeted advocated for socialism? Did anybody that you tweeted even start to defend socialism?
Well, hold on, I'm getting there, but I didn't necessarily mean to misrepresent you, nor do I think you actually defend socialism, or advocate for it, in other words. But I don't think that it's... I don't think that's the main topic here, which is getting a little off track. But if you want to keep on it, I'm fine.
We can go wherever you want to go.
Here. Just was looking at the Swedish thing. Sorry for being so disorganized and discombobulated. I am quite nervous because, again, this is quite smart when you just pull in people from Twitter to defend and make an argument.
Well, I guess it's just a little bit irritating on my end to see that somebody that has so much shit to talk on Twitter, when they talk to me, they have nothing to say. I don't know. That's just... Do you see how that could be a little frustrating on my end, I guess?
I definitely do. I'm a disorganized mess, but I think that's more to me because I think that... Okay. I'm not gonna... Again, I apologize for being so completely disoriented.
Alright, well, hey, do you want to call it here, buddy?
Yeah, if you want me off the
No,
strange.
you can talk for as long as you want. But if you feel like the conversation has come to a close, we can call it here if you want.
No, because I've been a little disoriented and discombobulated, so I would like to try and come off of this not looking like a complete and total jackass. So, which I've said looking like, because I haven't really made any valid points as of yet. But let's see here. Okay, so just now that I've gotten my thoughts somewhat collected, it's in terms of why, the original point on why incest is crap, I'm reading the chat and
Don't read the chat, dude. Ooh, that's
gonna start,
Oof. Now imagine trying to do this on a daily basis, except it's all over your Twitter, all over your social media, all over Reddit, and then on random forums about you too. Oof. You're getting this is a glimpse into my life. Huh.
I can again, I really don't want to come off as a hypocrite, so that's
You be waited MW
for
with that copy pasta. Otherwise is what I'm talking about.
It's in terms of getting insults. I honestly think that it's as long as you can insult someone, but then take it when it comes directed back at you. I think it's completely I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure, I agree just as much. I insult people all the time, and I expect to be insulted.
Yeah, I just was rambling on Twitter, so...
Yeah. But it's just, ideologically attacking me is different. If you want to call me a limp-wristed beta male manlet, that's totally cool. But you said that I defended socialism, and I defended incest. Now, these are ideological disagreements that are patently false. You might actually think I'm a beta male manlet, which is fine, or that I have a limp wrist, which is also fine. But a socialist supporter...
It's just, yeah.
No, I know. I'm just saying that, it's just the misrepresentation of arguments, I guess, is a little bit irritating. And an incest supporter, whew.
Yeah, that's, yeah, no, the chat is truly amusing. In terms of that and misrepresentation, with the socialism argument...
Yeah, I understand you were just memeing on that. I guess I got you there.
Yeah,
even though you brought it up in a second tweet, but we'll go ahead and say you were memeing there, sure.
Carried off with the people applying, but, so I... not necessarily directed towards you, but, with the incest argument, I really haven't, God, it's, what's difficult about this is you're a streamer, and so when you on YouTube, it's usually in large chunks, and so it's quite difficult to filter through that and make a concise point based off of that. But in any case, I think I disagree that incest is morally ambiguous. I don't think that there's, I think that there is a small gray area. Yeah, I'm dying on this is gonna be, I'm gonna die on stream.
Well, why is it morally wrong then? I guess that brings us back to the initial question.
I think it's morally wrong because it destroys families, and also the interpersonal relationships, which brings me back to that.
Well, what do you mean by destroys families? What if everyone in the family is cool with it?
I'm getting to that. I think you have to be some kind of messed up to just, think that it's completely morally okay. And I think the reason for this is if humans are so intrinsically ingrained with the instinct to be so opposed to incest, then I think that that definitely has to be something.
What about people that made the same arguments against interracial relationships? People that were revulsed by people that looked different than them. Do you think that that's a good argument, that interracial relationships are morally wrong?
I've got to collect my thoughts on that, because that's actually a fairly good point, but it's humans are naturally, drawn to people that are like them. They, prefer to be around. It's just that's one of our instincts. That's of which civilization is founded upon. People humans are social creatures, and they naturally really want to, they are more attracted to people that look like them, act like them, are similar to them. That's generally, again, how civilization has been formed. Is people go, people form groups based off of similarities.
So what the idea that you're kind of engaging with is the idea that we can extrapolate morals from our intuitive biological feelings. So if you think for a moment, because you're basically saying that if you have an innate revulsion towards something, it is morally wrong. Which I don't know if you want to make that argument, because I can ask you a million questions, and I know you're not going to agree with what comes from that, right? That's a really scary moral position to take, I think.
Yeah, it is, and I'm not. But good lord, the chat is amazing.
Just don't read the chat, ignore him.
It's highly amusing, though. But concerning that, it's you don't. That's the naturalistic fallacy or whatever, isn't it? Where it's basing off, moral arguments based off of,
nature, yeah.
Natural instinct, all of that. But if people, if in terms of your original point of interracial relationships, you have to. I look at people as the identity politics thing. It's.
Wait, what is identity? What do identity politics have to do with this?
Whenever you bring up let me get to that. But identity politics in terms of that, I think that's just what my morals are based off of. So, interracial thing.
Wait, your morals are based off of identity politics?
No, not, following identity politics. So I look at people as people rather than what they skin color is. So I think in terms of, that, so I think that you can't really compare interracial relationships and incest as the same thing when it's, and you're talking about not being able to associate with other people because of their skin color, as opposed to, siblings having intercourse. I think that the two are fundamentally different. Because with in terms of, interracial relationships, I can easily make the argument that, they are completely morally okay. Both sides are human beings that have no relation to each other. Assuming that, interracial incest relationships, which I'm not entirely sure how that would work out, but how that would be possible. But yeah, you see what I mean. I don't think that the two are really comparable, in terms of moral ambiguity.
Well, I never said they were comparable. Whether or not they're comparable in terms of moral consideration depends on what type of moral consideration you provide for your argument. So, for instance, if you say that incestual relationships are morally reprehensible because you have some sort of intuitive revulsion towards them, what you're arguing is that your intuitive revulsion towards a thing makes it morally reprehensible. So if we find other things that people are intuitively revulsed by, like, say, interracial relationships, by your own logic, you would have to argue that those are immoral. If you can find some way to escape the fact that they're immoral, then what you're saying is that an internal revulsion towards a behavior doesn't make it immoral, which means now we have to go back to the incest question because that was your original argument for making incest immoral. So it sounds like you don't believe an internal revulsion towards something makes it immoral, which is good. I don't agree with that position either. But now we're left at square one, where we have to ask, what is our opposition to incest?
In my opinion, the opposition to incest, again, comes from... Yeah, I love the chat, but I think incest, at least as a, we all know where opposition to incest, at least as a, on a social level, comes from.
Yeah, but the question wasn't, do we oppose it on a social level? Of course we do. The question is, what is the moral argument against it?
I know, I'm I'm trying to get to that, but in terms of the moral argument against it, it's just, again, so if we can agree on the fact that it's opposed generally on a social-wide level.
Well, we can agree on that, but that doesn't give us any sort of moral guidance unless you're trying to say that something that's opposed on a social level is morally reprehensible. Is that your argument?
Because it's the social, because that brings you back to, social stigmas in the early 1900s, right? Women couldn't vote, gays couldn't get married. So you can't, that's not an argument.
That's correct.
So... God, I look like an idiot. But I'm quite enjoying this, actually. But in terms of, as being morally reprehensible, I think it brings me back to my original argument of the different interpersonal relationships that you develop. I think to go against this, stigma in society, and also something that's been ingrained in your through, evolution or, whatever else you believe in. I think that there definitely has to be something, wrong with you to just completely throw all of that out the window. But that on itself isn't necessarily, too valid of an argument. Because there are cases where that argument could not stand up, where it's where there is someone totally sane trying to practice incest. But
all right, so bringing this back, so what are we talking about right now? What is our argument against incest that we're elaborating on?
I'm elaborating. Well, I just elaborated on the fact that I think that there has to be something wrong if you're going to go against all the social stigma around it, and also the ingrained instinct that was given to you through evolution or creationism or whatever.
So aren't we kind of back on that naturalistic argument then, that because we feel naturally about something, that's a good enough reason to call it morally reprehensible?
No, I said that that argument could be used in certain situations. Like I live in the South. It's awful. Uh, it's truly unfortunate, in my opinion. Just rednecks everywhere. But people that practice incest, the Deep South, they are, at least in my opinion, mentally impaired. They don't understand that there is a social stigma around it, and I think that if you don't understand that, then there's, that's an issue. If at the very least, if you want to practice incest, I will heavily disagree with you. Fundamentally, if you don't agree that there's a, massive social stigma around it, and that there is, instinct to not do it, then I think that there's, something wrong there, and that shouldn't be taken as a legitimate, relationship.
Wait, so we're saying the social stigma argument again, or?
No, not necessarily. I'm just saying that if you, at the very least, don't understand that there's a social stigma around it, then I don't think that, it's that you're in an actual legitimate, in incestuous relationship, because if you don't understand that there's, at the very least that society wrong with it, then I don't know what you're doing at that point.
Okay, but what does this have to do about the morality of the act itself, on whether or not incest is morally acceptable or not?
Well, I think that if you don't understand that there's a stigma around it, nationwide stigma, or ingrained instinct to not practice it, then I disagree that I should. In terms of I don't think that it's definitely not morally correct if you, at the very least, don't understand that there's a social stigma around it.
Okay, but we're not asking about whether or not something is morally correct if the person is unaware of the social stigma surrounding it. We're just asking if the action itself is morally acceptable or not.
Okay, I just was kind of getting off on a ramble there. But the action itself, again, goes back to the interpersonal relationships, and I think that if you're going to have a, romantic relationship with someone who you have grown up with, or at least interacted with while you were a child or they were a child, then let me just collect my thoughts for a second before I say something extremely dumb. I think that if you want to change that in a personal relationship, in yourself and someone that you've known that you've known while you were a child, or that you've known while they were a child, I think that is morally reprehensible, because at its core, I think that is just. I think that it's on a psychological level. I think that's definitely hard to attain, and I think that causes discord and fracture. Some fracture between whoever the family that is participating in it. Basically, essentially, can destroy normal families if siblings, decide that they're going to have an incestuous relationship. I think that can tear a family apart from its seams.
So right now, you're not arguing against the idea of incest. You're arguing that things that destroy families are bad. But if I can present to you a hypothetical where it has no impact on the family, say a brother and sister go off to college and engage in a sexual relationship, or say the parents are okay with it and their children engage in incestuous relationships with one another, then you don't really have arguments against these. You're just arguing in general against the destruction of the family, which is okay, but you can demonstrate ways that incest doesn't necessarily destroy the family. So this doesn't really work out to be a unique argument against incest, just a general argument against destroying families.
Yeah, well, in terms of the incest argument itself, I think that anything that could potentially tear apart relationships, is at the very least a dangerous thing that has to be taken into account.
Sure, but you got to be careful because now we're back at the interracial relationships. Let's say your mom and dad really don't want you dating somebody that's black. Does that mean that interracial relationships are morally wrong because it would hurt your family?
Good counter argument.
So at the beginning of that video, the first one that you sent at me, when they brought up the incest thing and somebody was like, is incest is morally wrong? And then I go, well, I don't know, is it? It's because these were the questions that I was thinking about. It's actually a really, really difficult argument to make, right? Do you agree with that now?
It is actually. Yeah, now that I'm actually arguing for it, it is definitely a difficult argument to make because it's getting into, morality, relationships between families. It's all of this gray area stuff is being condensed into one, point of argument. So, generally with, with it, really organize my thoughts.
Well, hey, listen, I think that this was a fun conversation. It sounds like you have a lot of stuff to think about. I think we can cut it here. I don't think we're going to get much farther down this line of thinking. I've spent a great deal of time thinking about this. And so coming up with things on the spot is going to be really difficult. But do you have
I've thought about it quite a bit too, but it's I just am god awful at articulating arguments, at least. So
yeah, that's fine. All right. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate the conversation. Do you have any final words or parting thoughts for us?
Other than, I just got completely annihilated, and this was a regrettable experience, then, that's about it.
Hey, I appreciate the conversation, buddy. Stay safe. Have a good night. I hope you recover from your cold.
You too. And again, with the Twitter insults, at the very least, I just don't want to be seen as a hypocrite because, definitely reading the chat, I've seen some of the most creative insults I've ever seen, which is highly amusing.
All right, well, hey, buddy.
Sorry for boring you.
No problem. It was a fun conversation. Have a nice night.
Have a good night.
This is our Twitter warrior for tonight. Oh man, whew. When I just get to bring him in and chat with him, it just feels like a meme. Anybody else feel the meme? I felt the meme.